Thanks for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and our guest today is relatively new elected City of South Miami Commissioner Brian Corey. Welcome and congratulations to you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me. It's
All right.
always great to come to the studio.
All right. Thanks. So the election was in April, all right? And as you know, it was happened to be on April 20th. That was in tribute to the April 20th date that a lot of people are familiar with that.
Yes.
All right. And so, and if you don't know, it's too late, so it doesn't matter. But this is the first time out for you, all right? What you had served on a planning board for the city, right?
Yes.
And you were appointed when were you appointed to that board?
That would have been 2 years ago.
And what caused you 2 years ago plus to say, I want to serve the city and I want to get on the planning board? How did that happen?
Well, I've always been politically involved. I think mostly nationally, obviously from the sidelines as a voter, things like that. Been very passionate about it. I got a little disenfranchised with the way national politics has been going, but as I got into local and seeing how things were there, it seemed like a great place for me to put that civic energy into. Been going to a lot of commission meetings, and then, I was lucky enough to be appointed, and I, gradually enjoyed it more and more. So this was a good next step for me. I ran and I was fortunate enough to win. And it was exciting.
Some people spend years and years and years serving on boards and then running and then losing and then going back again. All right. But in this case, all right, you were able to do it relatively unknown, all right, to the average person. And yes, you were on the board, and yes, you were probably on some TV that was over there. Now, what were some of the skills you learned from your family business, Corey Advertising? The skills that you learned there, how did you use some of that to help people find out about you?
Well, it obviously helps to have a branding background, a marketing background, and to be specialized in digital. But one of the things I really made sure I did was not, think everything's a nail if you're a hammer, and really take a deep look at South Miami and what they care about and how it was best to communicate with people. So even though I did have a good digital campaign, I did focus on my messaging and all the things that I do as a marketer. I also, was on the streets talking to people and finding the right people, the local influencers, and talking directly to voters and seeing what mattered to them. So I think, and I didn't have a lot of time. It was a 40-day campaign,
which is incredible.
Yeah. And within the first week, I made like 20 mistakes. So I started to really learn from that as quickly as possible and didn't take a single day for granted. I always just felt like if I wasn't out there talking to people, if I didn't hit 100 people a day, I wasn't doing the right thing.
So lots of times people that are in the market of selling things just try to sell the stuff that they have. All right. Mm-hmm. When we go to a restaurant, there's a variety of things to have, and you can go to fish place. Fish House is my favorite place, by the way, on Miller. All right. No connection there. And but they do have hamburgers and they do have sushi. So people want different things and will vote for candidates for different reasons. When you live up north, mm-hmm. on the north end of South Miami, when was the last time somebody north side was elected?
25 years ago. That would have been Julio Urbana.
Right, which is incredible. Former commissioner, then mayor, and then the state rep for a few years. Most of the commissioners that have been represented lived actually a few blocks from here on 64th Court, except for Josh, who was by the Donnie Facel. What do the people up north tell you what they're looking for versus the people down at the south end of South Miami?
Well, honestly, they were disconnected. A lot of them didn't necessarily even know that they were part of the South Miami community. It certainly didn't feel like South Miami to them in terms of the park availability, in terms of traffic mitigation on the streets, and even in terms of civic engagement. So as I was going door to door there, I told them that I wanted to make the northern part of South Miami, like the rest of South Miami, and bring everybody in. And that message resonated with them. But obviously I wasn't just focused on that northern area. I was focused as well on all the different parts of South Miami. So.
And we get it, like for the city of Miami, pretty big city, there's different neighborhoods, all right? And some neighborhoods get more attention than the others. That's why they have districts, if you will.
Yeah.
So up at the north end, are there many, excuse me for not knowing, roundabouts or
No, no real roundabouts, no real speed bumps, not a whole lot of traffic mitigation in general, not a lot of street lights. It's not really designed for young families, even though that is one of the most popular places for young families. And I think most importantly, not a lot of park space, which is why within the first couple months I've been in office, I did identify a space that I'm interested in turning into a park, and it will be coming up in the CIP plan.
and these things create civic pride, and then it leads to the next thing. It's sort of like, God forbid you have to paint your house because you know what's coming next. New furniture, new carpet, new everything, new lighting, right? And that's what happens in the areas that are being worked on. There's a street over off of 67th Avenue. There are 4 or 5 speed bumps, and I'm telling you, it couldn't be 2.5 blocks long, right? That's more in that one street than everything up north. Is that correct?
But that is true. But I'm learning a lot about traffic mitigation now, and a part of that is how close that community is, because speed bumps involve consensus. They involve the people where the speed bumps are happening to be happy with that being in front of their house. So the closer the community, the more likely you're to see traffic mitigation, the more likely you're to see parks and things like that. So part of what I'm doing up north right now is bringing everybody together and addressing these problems that we have together. And again, it's not just the north. I do have a plan. I'm hoping to be able to create a park within a quarter mile of every house in South Miami, and we're not far off as well, given the bigger projects that are coming in.
So one of the things people have really come in tune with is their needs during the last 15 months, and their desires, and the connection to their family, and the trade-offs in there. People do want to be heard. They don't want to think they're alone, because some people want to lead, but a lot of people want to be an organization already there that they can join, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you were doing around the community, not just up north, to help people feel a little bit more connected to the city?
Well, I think one of the things, I guess one of the attributes that voters really appreciated was my ability to listen. And I focused on that, just making sure I heard all of their problems and that I did the follow through necessary to get their items to the city manager. I was working on traffic mitigation. I was working on issues related to voters even before I was in office, because I would meet with the city manager, weekly, just to sort of get a sense of what was going on in the city, and relay these issues to them. And I'm still working on some of those things, because some of those things take a lot of time, but I've done the listening and the follow through. Now, in terms of people getting involved, that is incredibly tricky, especially once you make your way into the commission. You have your, sunshine laws that prevent you from, necessarily getting out there and spreading all the information about things that you're actively, voting on. But also, my ability to promote things like individual events or individual businesses, I also can't do that. So my role, I'm continuing to speak with people on the individual level, continuing to try and bring people into these commission meetings. But yeah, it is a challenge.
So how did you learn to be so symbiotic with your constituents? When did you realize you had that ability to listen?
I on the planning board, as issues would come up that I was passionate about, I would reach out to the community, people I knew were passionate about it too, and get them coming to the meetings. And when I did that, they experienced the same sort of, enjoyment that I get out of doing this, the ability to make positive change. So once I was doing that, and going door to door, I wish I could still do that. Honestly, I think people would be upset with me if I still did that and I wasn't campaigning, but I do it to an extent. I still go and talk to people in areas that were working on things. But that experience was probably absolutely the best. Just finding those people who are passionate, just like I was, and getting them involved in the things that we're working on.
And that's great to be able to do that. And so one of the things that I hope you're able to do is be able to get the people that are right on the verge of becoming involved. And so how do you move them from being very vocal with you and them explaining and telling you about some things they were like? How do you move from their house to the city's house down the street on Sunset Drive?
Well, it's in different tiers. So now I've already been engaging people about, board appointments and things like that. That is really the ultimate step before even getting into a position like I am in. Once you're on that board and you're really heavily engaged in that particular field, that's a great stepping stone to bigger and better things. But, other than that, I actually think moving the elections to November will get more people just in the know about these local issues, because now the commissioners are going to be on the ballot in November.
So, and that's a really good point, because when there's this general think tank of as far as it's election time, all right, people start paying more attention versus the way the city had it for years. Well, when is election time? You know when it is? It's when the people in January start knocking on some doors.
Right.
So now it's going to be in the regular cycle, all right? And I agree that people are more passionate, and they get stimulated by other things that they hear, and it triggers it for the local. We know local. It's important, and you've been involved in the city well enough to know, that people care about the community. So what is it like, without specifically naming any project, to where you've seen a project that comes before, in this case, the commission, and you think it's a really good project, right? And you think that overall it's a good thing. Then you have neighbors, right? And most people don't go cheering any developments. It's just the way it is. Most people, the time when they show up, they're voicing opposition to a lot of things. So getting pulled over here, the things that you know is going to be good, and then people, and you're getting pulled this way. So how do you process that?
Well, it is so complicated, and every vote you make, not just a vote on that particular item, but the subsequent votes you will have to make to stay that course, makes all of these issues very dynamic, and difficult to operate on. So the biggest problem that I have isn't when I see a project that I like, and I get feedback from residents. It's when I don't. So when I see a project that I like, I still get feedback from residents. I reach out to the people who I know are going to be opposed to it, and some of the very, very intelligent, talented people who volunteer for the city. I make sure that they're in the know. And like I said, I've reached out to people who opposed things that I was for, and they showed up and spoke against it. So, and because I reached out to them, but I want to know the other sides of the argument. I don't just want to have rose-colored glasses on something. I want to know how it's going to affect all the neighbors that are immediately there. Of course, we have to focus on the greater good for the community. But if you don't know that is the biggest challenge I think you can have as a commissioner, is to not have any public feedback and have to make that decision based on your opinion alone, which is definitely not the job, I think.
Years ago, with not too many, somebody called up and said, "I hate developers." So I said, "You mean the one that made the Publix for you?
Right.
The one that built your house?" And so there is this thing of this anger or anguish, that people think that because something is going up, that therefore it's going to hurt them. The reality is that historically, those properly put together developments, whether it's an apartment complex, a duplex, or a shopping center, in a big way, help everybody that lives there. We know there's this really big shopping, the Shops of Sunset was over there. Been through probably 6 or 7 evolutions. We hope that when things get settled over there, that bigger good, which is how do you get feet on the ground, and people are going to come there. All right, I don't know when that's going to be, but for years people have been saying we need a more vibrant downtown. So what is it that you think the city could do to help that along?
Well, we as a commission in the city, need to deal with developers professionally, and they appreciate that. They understand that we're going to hold their feet to the fire. What they don't want is for us to have that sort of dogmatic view that they are evil and coming in to take advantage of our city, because nobody wants to work in that sort of condition, and we're not going to get what we want out of that. And there's a flip side to the coin of not developing at all. You have the housing crisis that exists in South Miami. I mean, this isn't the latest figure, but the average home value in South Miami is $715,000. That's a result of underdevelopment in the city, and that means that people who are young trying to get entry-level property are completely excluded from it. People whose taxes are going through the roof and are essentially being replaced by other families, whether that's in the historically Black community or whether that's people who have lived in South Miami for 30, 40 years. That's where that comes from. So you have to look at the flip side of everything, and you have to deal with developers professionally. They're not our constituents. They are our merchants. They are business. interests, and they want to be dealt with professionally. So they understand, like I said, we're going to hold their feet to the fire, but we can't be negative or nasty with them, but we can't give them everything they want either, because we have our own public interests in mind.
And now that the pandemic is all but over, do you anticipate there will be more people showing up in City Hall to voice their opinion of support and against things?
I think the lack of attendance at City Hall was in part because the information wasn't as readily available. The city's already doing things like the SOMI Insider, reaching out a little bit more on social. I'm informing more people now. But when they get to these city commission meetings, the commission as a team needs to also present itself well. We need to operate as a team in the interest of the city, and we need to get people continuing to come back. To have that good experience that they do at the commission, that they've been heard, that their opinions were put into play with whatever, ordinance or resolution we're voting on. So it's not just about getting more people there, it's getting people to come back. And we're starting to see that, the commission attendance is building. It's not where I would be happy with it being. We still have Zoom going. I want to keep that going just as a way to have more and more attendance. But I think that's the key. I think over time we will pack that chamber if we show people that when they show up and they give their opinions, that we do our job and include that in whatever we're voting on.
And I think that's important. And if you look around town, sometimes these government bodies treat the residents or the speakers, the shareholders appropriately. Sometimes it gets out of control, which really sort of long-term hurts participation.
Right.
So we hope that this go around that it's much smoother, and I suspect that it is. And I'm pleased that we're getting positive reports from the way people are behaving. I see that Chief Landa just is serving in another capacity. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, he was just appointed, I believe, the president of what was it, the police?
Yeah, like the police chiefs. He's like the boss of the police chiefs group.
And it's incredible. And I've had a bunch of meetings with him already, and he's, fantastic at what he does. I'm really happy with our police department as well. We've done some pioneering things. We were doing body cameras and community policing far before anybody else was doing it. Their social outreach is very positive as well, but there's still a lot that we have to do. Obviously, the entire criminal justice system is under a magnifying glass and part of a national conversation, and we have to be part of it because we're actually doing the right thing. So we really should be more, but yeah.
And I think the cameras are a great thing at the beginning in the new thing. Well, you shouldn't, but you know what? I think it's a great thing.
Look, and my wife is a prosecutor, and that helps her do her job. It helps her do her job to have that evidence, and they know, and I think it's a general consensus that this is the accepted practice moving forward. But I think it's important to note that we had that, and we had community policing, before more recent events have turned everything on its head. So.
Years ago, there was a officer-friendly program, or whether it was sanctioned or not, I'm not sure. But are there some things that the police force has so that the youngsters, and particularly in Lee Park and across the street over here, where there's groups of them together in apartment complexes, is there something the police force does so the youngsters can meet policemen, and so they realize that they're not all bad because they give traffic tickets to people?
I think that's a fantastic idea. I think the outreach to the community is a little bit more general, but I found knocking on doors that the opinion was the older population was very pro-police, and the younger population was very, concerned with what was going on. So they should try some more, youth-based outreach. Of course, we're piling on all these responsibilities for police officers that already have a very, very difficult job. So I think whenever we're considering changing the way of doing things or adding the way of doing things, I think we should also consider the fact that this is a very, very difficult job.
There was a program that I thought was coming back. It was the race relations board.
Oh, the community relations board.
Yes. Okay. Tell us about that.
All right. So it's a little complicated where it is right now. It hasn't gone before any boards for approval or the commission for approval, but there's essentially two people on the dais who are pushing this, and I already have ideas for ways I could contribute, but I'm going to wait for that idea to come forward. But basically, they're going to bring back a community relations board whose main goals are still being hammered out, but previously it was a way for the community to communicate with each other, whether that was on race or whether that was on housing or whether that was on criminal justice or however. So I think it sort of faded away before, and I want it to stick this time. And I have some ideas for ways to give them more solid goals, but it isn't my baby, so I'm going to wait for them to come out with the plan. I'm going to read it thoroughly, and then I'll add my ideas if I think it's appropriate. But I think me being a communications specialist, I understand the value of this. If it is just communication, I understand the value of this, but I actually want it to have a greater role, a little bit more teeth as a board, so to speak. So I'll find ways to do that.
About a year and a half ago, before the pandemic, I get invited to go do the show, and I go, and I realized that they were 3 successful African Americans, males, 2 females, 1 Hispanic, and me. So they said, "You're the white guy." And I said, I've never been called that except for once or twice. And so it was like, why don't we do more coverage in the Black communities? And I said, well, if you want me to tell you the truth, it's because our advertisers don't want to reach you and we don't serve that area. But it's up to the PR lady, happens to be Black, to show us and tell us why we should cover that. So that was an incident by itself. Pandemic comes aboard. Then we realize the disparity between color, race, sometimes religion, wealth, all right, and lack of that. So one of the things that we've learned is, yes, there is a disparity. And when I said to one of the people running for Congress that wanted me to talk about socialism, I said, I can't do that. But what I can talk about is the African Americans in Dade County need help, and I have white privilege. But let's talk about the Everglades, and let's talk about the ocean. That's what we need to talk about. And what I realized is that being white and being somewhat privileged, that's not a bad thing, right? We should use that to help in this better good. So if somebody wouldn't listen to my Black counterpart, we can do that talking. And sometimes, and I've been called the white guy and who appointed him and all that stuff. Okay, I'm just speaking up. And I think what's important for all of us, especially the little kids who don't care what color, what gender, it's irrelevant. But as you get older, you start having these areas that you want to preserve. I think that it's important for South Miami to have a real direct connection between the parents and the kids and then the seniors, a way for them to be able to go voice themselves in a protected and safe manner, so that if there's a problem, they can be dealt with, and at least give them a voice to be able to be heard, because we don't want to be alone. So I hope that the city can create that board and make it really functional, right?
Yeah.
And to reach out to the people that need that. Dr. Tina Scott, who's been taking care of kids over at the Children's Center for 30 years, or 20 years, devoted her life to do that. She went way out of her way, all right, to make sure the kids in the neighborhood and the parents in the neighborhood got the attention when they needed, all right? Just medical care for years, and recently with the vaccine. We know that some of the kids across the street from here that originally thought that maybe they would go to the private school or the charter school down the street, but they didn't. And Reverend Green told me years ago, Michael, you know who goes to those schools, and the ones that get Habitat for Humanity loans? The ones that fill out the paperwork. So if nobody's helping them, they're not going to get there.
Right.
So what do you think that the city could do to help that connection to grow people?
So I'm going to solve racism right now. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I think the city has a unique ability to attack these problems and be creative with it, because we happen to be a city with a large minority community and a large historically Black community, which is fantastic. That, obviously there is so much history there, Marshall Williamson, and, everything that we can keep as part of the culture of the city. And we have the ability to attack those things through the community relations board. But we also have, an ability to deal with it without the other macro problems, because solving this as a country is going to be harder than solving this as
Right.
a city, and starting to address the needs that they have. Because, during the campaign, I saw the stark contrast in the problems that existed. You had crime and difficulty getting youth programs together on one side, and then you had peacocks on the other side of the street, right? So like the problems were very different, and very different in terms of severity. Now, if we look at the general problems, it's not always just isolated to that one community. If you look at gentrification, if you look at the housing crisis, that's also to do with the elderly population in South Miami, and the same problem exists. The culture of South Miami that's existed for generations is going away as people are being essentially replaced. They're being priced out of the market. They're being evicted. All of these things are happening, not just in the historically Black community. So if we can all come together and start addressing those issues together, we're working on something together, and that's a step in the right direction.
And I think people want to see that step, whether it's a little step or a big step, because we know the way we make photographs, as you know, is little pixels.
Right.
And when you get enough of them, it starts to form something.
Yeah, but the easier stuff to me is to show that we care and that we're listening.
Yes.
We recently did pass the paid day off for Juneteenth.
Yes.
And members of the Black community, prominent members of the Black community, showed up to the meeting when they had not been showing up before, and they continue to show up. And we're saying, hey, we're listening, even though we're a board full of or a commission full of white people.
And by the way, I hear Holmes Braddock, former school board member for many, many years, is going to be at City Hall on Saturday in celebration of June 19th.
Yeah.
Right. So he's going to be there on this Saturday. And Holmes has served this community for a very, very long time. For folks that don't know, that school was named after him out of West Kendall, Holmes Braddock High School out there. He's 95 and still trucking, man. Way to go, Mr. Braddock. We have 5 minutes left. So years ago, there was a study that was done by the Green Task Committee Formation.
Green Task Force
that came up with a document explaining some of the challenges of the City Hall as far as medical reason and a little bit of structure. And there were conversations years ago about either making some improvements. Is there any public movement towards doing something over there, or with that police station, which my brother, unfortunately, was one day spent a couple hours over at the jail, locked up there years ago. In case you didn't know, you can look him up. All right. Any conversations about improving the police station and/or City Hall?
Yeah, so the police station would be first. Of course, we're still looking for grant money to build it. We've determined a location at the former, inspection station, and we're prepping that property to be able to build the police station there. Now, it's still going to cost about $7.5 million to build that station, something that's not really within, our $20 million annual budget to tackle ourselves. But it's an initiative that our city manager especially has been really digging into grants to try and find a way to get that to go first. Now, once that happens, that'll clear off that portion of the land that's on City Hall, and we'll figure out what to do with City Hall then. But in terms of movement, police stations definitely has an actual plan in place. So
that's great. Years ago, there was a discussion about this. 25 years ago, about the gym building. What's that called? The 2-story building at Murray Park.
You mean
the Rec Center?
Bethel Gibson?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was just an idea. And I was on a committee. Somebody said, well, where are we going to get the money for that? Simon Codrington, God bless him, he said, don't worry about the money. Let's come up with the plan. And son of a gun, the money came. So I hope the city continues along the way.
Well, and what I've been learning a lot more about this is, with our budgets and what we're capable of doing, we do have to bring these things to plan and design and be shovel ready so that we can be, we can win these grants. Yes. And that we can go to Tallahassee if we have to, or go wherever. And that's why, we got to play nice with those people, because we're a city with a relatively low budget. Yes. That needs to do big things, and we're not going to be able to do it on our own.
So you said exactly, we're ready to go. All right. We're not thinking about it. This is it. We're ready. All right. We just need to get our counterparts to issue permits. So that's very good. And we're very supportive of that. And certainly that will help change the perception of that particular area. And with an upgrade over there, it's going to be wonderful. Again, our guest today is Brian Corey, City of South Miami Commissioner after serving several years on the planning board. Thank you very much. Continued success to you and to your family, and say hi to your 1 and your 3-year-olds.
Will do.
Howard, thanks for producing the show. Folks, again, this is Live with Miami's Community News. Have